Welcome to video clip 6.3, in which we look at decision requirements diagrams. We do so in a bit more structured way than we did in the previous video lectures, where we introduced decision requirements diagrams just by looking at examples. So the most important modeling element, of course, is the decision. And the decision determines from a set of input values, output values. That's basically what the decision is. Typically, each decision has one output value, but it can also have more than one output value. Decision is assigned a decision logic, but it can also invoke a business knowledge. And a business knowledge contains knowledge on how a decision should be taken. So actually encodes or includes the decision logic. The point is that business knowledge can be reused by different decisions. So you can specify the decision logic at one place, and different decisions can take advantage of the decision logic represented in the business knowledge. And therefore the wording is also well selected, because this element includes the business knowledge, the decision logic, to be used by different decisions. It is invoked by decision. So when I say decision uses a business knowledge, what actually technically happens that the business knowledge is invoked by decisions, and input data is transferred to the business knowledge by the decision, and the business knowledge provides output to the decision. And here on the right-hand side, you see, of course, the let's see if that. You see the decision element and also the business knowledge notational element here. But there are further model elements, and that is input data. So input data just encodes what is the data used for taking the decision. It can also be linked to a process by a label, and we'll look into that in a bit more detail when we cover consistency between process models and decision models. So this is how input data looks like. We have knowledge sources. Knowledge sources represent reasons for decisions, and they are more to document decisions. So that might be legal regulation, certain business policies that might be in place, or also human experts. So the knowledge source can also be used in decision requirements diagrams. It's not really, it doesn't really encode the business logic, but it encodes the reason why a certain decision is taken, or why a certain decision is taken as it is specified in the decision requirements diagram. So looking at an example, at an abstract example here, we have decision. What we see here also, that is this decision one that we like to come up with. It uses a knowledge source. So there is knowledge source one attached here, and we see that it is attached through a so-called authority requirement. So knowledge sources are attached to decisions and also to business knowledges by so-called authority requirements. But we also see in this example that we can use the output of one decision to come up with as input for another decision. So here the output of decision 2 is used as input for decision 1. And we can use this instrument to come up with almost arbitrarily complex decision structure, where you have sub-decisions that contribute, that is, whose return value are used in other decisions then. And then we have input data, so decision 2 uses input data. Decision 2 has a decision logic, uses the decision logic of a business knowledge, which is attached to a knowledge source 2. And well, when decision 2 is taken, the input is provided, is fed to decision 1, and decision 1 then uses that return value of decision 2 to come up with its decision. We also see these dotted lines with the arrowhead, and these are so-called knowledge requirements. So whenever a decision invokes a business knowledge, we have a knowledge requirement. And the input and also the sub-decisions, these provide information, and therefore these requirements are called information requirements, and these are all the dependencies that we have in decision requirements graphs. So let's look at an example, or let's return to the example of the credit card. Here, the decision uses applicant age and employment status as input, and the decision is based on certain eligibility policy of the institution and also a certain legal regulation or legal document. So we have this part we have already seen in the previous example, but here we have two additional authority requirements relating to the eligibility policy and also to a certain legal document. On these two model elements enrich the model by additional information that makes also traceable what is the impact of a certain regulation to a decision. Okay, as we've seen before, a decision can have an internal decision logic, but it can also use the decision logic provided by a business knowledge. And this is exactly done here. So we have the decision here, and the decision invokes the business knowledge called eligibility rules. And here we see also that the decision still has the inputs, so the same inputs that it has before. And these inputs are then provided to the business knowledge. The business knowledge applies the decision logic and returns the output as the output of the decision. We also see here that knowledge sources are linked to business knowledges rather than to decisions in this example. Why? Well, because the decision logic is kept in the business knowledge. So we have here this requirement, also this authority requirement, because the decision logic is in the eligibility rules. It's no longer in the decision itself. So whenever a decision invokes a business knowledge, the authority requirements should then go to the business knowledge. And this is because the business knowledge contains the decision logic. We can also specify organizational aspects in decision requirements diagrams, and this is done through the attribute mechanism that we have seen already in the process modeling. So each decision can be associated with a decision maker and a decision owner. So the decision maker is the person or role that actually takes the decision in the operational business. The decision owner is the person or role that is actually responsible for the decision. So it might be the head of a department that is responsible for all decisions that are taken by personnel, by staff within this department. And we can use here, we see a screenshot of the Signavio system. We here see that looking at the determine basic credit card eligibility decision, we have here decision maker is the member of the credit card checking department. The decision owner is the head of the credit card checking department. You see it here circled in the lower part of this screenshot. So we want to continue with a sample scenario, and this scenario is about the withdrawal of funds at a bank. So a client expresses the wish to withdraw 9,000 euros from his bank account, so a significant amount of money. The bank needs to take the decision whether or not the funds can actually be provided to the client. First, we look at the decision requirements, at the structure of decisions, and we model it here as through three decisions. Two decisions being the sub-decision of the decision check withdrawal request. We have a sub-decision looking at are there sufficient funds? So are there sufficient funds on the account of the applicant? And is the applicant identified? So is there a valid identification of the person who entered the bank? Then we look at input data. We can add input data to this. So we also need to have the amount, so the 9,000 euro in this case. We need to have the funds. And with amount and funds, we can surely check if there are sufficient funds. So these two are input data to the decision, sufficient funds. And we also see here that the amounts data, or the amounts input, is also input to the check withdrawal request. So this is also used here. So we have one data object or one input that is used in different decisions. The valid identification, in order to check if the person has a valid identification, we need 3 inputs. That is the document, that is the nationality, and that is the age of the customer. And that is a part of the decision requirements diagram that look at decisions, their structure, and also the inputs. But we can also define knowledge sources here, and that's done basically just by adding one additional legal regulation, German legal regulation, that exactly tells us how we need to identify a person in these types of applications, certain paragraph. Finally, the only thing that is missing now is coming to the decision logic. So whenever there is, for each decision that we have here, so the 3 decisions that we have here, we need to define the decision logic, and the decision logic will then be defined in the next video clip. That brings us to the end of video clip 6.3, in which we introduce decision requirements diagrams. We learned that these diagrams structure decisions and their context. So by context, we mean the input data required for taking the decision, the knowledge sources, and also the business knowledges. We have seen that we can define decisions in a modular way. A decision can be used by another decision, and here we can have a hierarchical structure, almost an arbitrary network structure on how the decisions on subdecisions relate to each other in your organization.